Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. Following Israel's breaking of the ceasefire in Gaza, there has been a shift in the dynamics and in the defense strategy of the Palestinian resistance. The Palestinian resistance was delaying direct combat against the Israeli forces inside of the Gaza Strip, despite Israel going deeper into Gazan territories and actually claiming that it's looking to control these territories. The Israeli foreign minister threatened Hamas and the Palestinians in general, the global population, that more territories will be lost unless they expel the Palestinian resistance and submit to the Israeli demands. Now, the Palestinian resistance, and I spoke about this in one of the previous videos, they have a dynamic way of defending themselves inside of the Gaza Strip. So in certain periods previously, there were periods where there was actually not a lot of action coming from the Palestinian resistance, depending on the timing, the location, the operations that were happening from the Israeli army of terror inside of the Gaza Strip. However, the longer that this is getting delayed, the Israeli presence or the lack of reaching to a ceasefire. There are talks, but no agreement has been reached yet. And we will speak about the developments in relation to the ceasefire and the problems that are happening now, increasing day by day. Clearly, there's been a decision made by the Palestinian resistance to start attacking. But before they started attacking, they are clearly now implementing a strategy inside of the Gaza Strip where they are actively luring the Israeli soldiers into certain areas, making them feel comfortable and established without any feeling of threat necessarily against them, up until they seize the moment and find the right time to attack them. They've done that previously many times, but previously there were more activities in multiple other parts too, and there was no declaration about a ceasefire. There's another notion that the Palestinian resistance is assuming that this is a period that will end relatively soon, relatively quickly. But now clearly they are having these attacks against Israel with two significant attacks. The previous attack that we spoke about several days back was an ambush, and over a dozen Israelis were killed or wounded in that attack. Now they had an attack against three Merkava tanks. Three Merkava tanks today inside of the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian resistance, in particular, Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas. They were the ones who targeted them with, again, a Yasin 105. We're seeing a return of the Yasin 105, the RPG that was modified and was manufactured by the Palestinian resistance, that targeted over 1,200 machinery, equipment, tanks, and bulldozers of the terror army of Israel. Many of the Israeli tanks out of service completely. They cannot function anymore. Many more tanks, they can hardly find any replacement. The United States now is helping them with some of the parts. There were reports that the United States actually delivered a shipment that was received today by Israel that included bombs, over 1-ton bombs, again, bunker busters, to be used against who exactly? To be used against children in hospitals. That's what they're using it against. What's happening? Sending them bunker busters. Well, everything is still operational in Gaza. I mean, if you want to talk about the resistance, who are the Israel using it against? The people. Bakeries, hospitals, schools, shelters, tents, whatever they feel like, under any pretext under the sun. But back to the attack. So this wasn't the only attack. So they roasted three Merkava tanks with child murderers inside them. Usually each Merkava tank, it has about 4, genocidal maniacs inside it. And they targeted 3 today. That's only Al-Qassam brigades. On the other hand, the armed wing of the PIJ, they targeted the Netzarim line with missiles too. The Netzarim line, Israel is back in some parts of Netzarim, the area that they controlled in the central parts of Gaza. And the armed wing of the PIJ, Al-Quds brigades, they targeted them with multiple rockets, missiles. Okay, what does that tell you? What does that say exactly? Well, it's saying a couple of things. Number one, if the Palestinian resistance, as part of its tactic or as part of its strategy or dynamic strategy of defense in Gaza, decided that they temporarily weren't actually attacking the Israeli soldiers inside of Gaza, but rather, for example, launching missiles on Israel, on certain bases in Israel too, assuming that Netanyahu might go back to a ceasefire agreement. Well, that clearly isn't working. That clearly isn't happening. And now they are having more attacks against Israel. And not necessarily just the ambushes, direct confrontation. So usually when you talk about a Yasin 105 missile, you're talking about a missile that, well, they need to use it, the RPG. They need to use it with them. Someone needs to hold it, and someone is going out, and they're confronting, and they are attacking. Okay. This means that there is an escalation happening inside of the Gaza Strip, despite Benjamin Netanyahu now not reaching an agreement, still not reaching any breakthrough. He is not giving the negotiating delegation any mandates. The only development that happened on the front of the negotiations today was that Benjamin Netanyahu had phone security consultations with some of the other members of the government or relevant bodies, relevant figures in the Israeli security establishment to do with a potential ceasefire. When is that all coming? When is this development happening? These security consultations, all of this, talk, it's coming. It's more reports coming from Israel that it's not only a problem. The people refusing to serve in the Israeli army, it's not just a problem. It's the biggest crisis in the history of the state of Israel. So there was one report on Plus 972 magazine. The Israel army is facing its biggest refusal crisis in decades. They're saying in decades. It's not in decades, it's ever. Israel never had this level of crisis. And in this report, they're saying over 100,000 Israelis have reportedly stopped showing up for reserve duty. While their reasons differ, the scale demonstrates the war's waning legitimacy. This is something massive. Over 100,000 stopped showing up. That means some of those who did not even declare that they do not want to serve in Israel are ridiculing the army now. They're looking as if it's something ridiculous. Not showing up completely, not listening to anyone, and treating the army as if it's like a side job that they're not really interested in or that they don't really need. Alongside more reports that this letter and more petitions are happening in Israel, growing to tens of thousands now, tenfolding almost each day, with Benjamin Netanyahu facing an unprecedented crisis. However, the big problem is Benjamin Netanyahu is still in power. And Benjamin Netanyahu's main aim is to remain in power. Netanyahu's aim isn't victory, isn't to get back the Israeli prisoners of war, isn't even eliminating Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu's main aim is to remain in power. That's why he has multiple fronts open at the same time, so that if one front de-escalates, he can escalate another front. Now, the main front is Gaza. However, he wants he has other, of course, fronts open, but he wants Gaza to remain open for as long as possible. And he doesn't care about victory. He doesn't care about people. And as a matter of fact, he doesn't care about the protests. And he doesn't care about the people refusing to serve. None of that matters to Benjamin Netanyahu. And the severity of the problems that Israel is facing now isn't even something that's bothering him. What's bothering him is only his position, his trial, his excuses, him running away from justice, finding excuses not to go to court hearings, and stay in his position without anyone bothering him up until the next election. So he wants to promote himself as the new Ben Gurion. He wants to hope, or he is striving to actually to expel Palestinians from Gaza. If he succeeds, unlikely, but if he succeeds, he will show himself to everyone in Israel as if he was the second person to expel that many Palestinians all at once, after the Nakba in 1948 and the Naksa in 1967, where in total over 1 million Palestinians were expelled, 750,000 in 1948, approximately 350,000 in 1967. So we're talking about 1.1 million approximately in total. If he manages to expel several hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza, he will show himself as if he is the person who saved Israel forever. Now, all of that is secondary to his interests. Therefore, that is not really affecting him. He's meeting, as a matter of fact, there were reports that he met with some of the families of the prisoners of war. Mind you, these would be the families of the prisoners of war who are aligned with him, because there are those who are for the war, and there are those who are for like ending the war. From the families of the prisoners of war who are held in Gaza. The majority want to stop it, but there are some of them who are heavily aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu, and they just want to continue. They are calling him to have more attacks against, the Palestinian resistance, not allow any aid in. And guess what? Some of the Israeli families of the prisoners of war, they were witnessing the Israeli forces torturing Palestinian prisoners in Jerusalem, who the Israeli forces claimed were members of those who conducted the attack of the 7th of October. False claims, of course, because Israel, they kidnapped thousands of Gazans. And one of the Palestinians who was kidnapped and released, he described his torture story. I spoke about him in a video a couple of weeks ago. And in his video, apart from the unbelievable things they faced during that period of time, he said that they were torturing them in front of families of prisoners of war. Imagine, so they were looking at them being beaten, being humiliated, every single torture you can think of, and having fun. So there are some families of prisoners of war in Gaza who are like that. So Netanyahu met with them to try and show that, no, not everyone is against me. No, there are some who are with me. And he has people who are with him, of course. There is a cult following for him who will, of course, follow him and whatever he does. But the majority, they want to end the war, regardless, again, of their position on the genocide in general, or the position of Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel as a state towards the Palestinians. And the bigger problem is, the IDF, although they have had internal problems and still do have internal problems, the approach that they're having, but that's again from their organizational perspective. Because the IDF as an establishment, as an army, they're different, of course, than the prime minister. They work together, they receive orders from the defense minister who works under the prime minister. And we saw how much politics has been involved in the horrors that the Israeli terror army has been conducting in Gaza. But the problem is they're not helping the case by having a very harsh approach towards anyone who is even signing a petition or like publicly supporting a petition, like the petition that said we need to stop the war at any cost. So there was this report in Haaretz today. The IDF threatens to dismiss army medics for signing anti-war petition. Israel's chief medical officer is contacting reservists who signed the petition, requesting they remove their names and summoning them to hearings. But no steps have been taken to dismiss signatories. So they're threatening to dismiss them, but they are not dismissing them. Well, it's because they have no replacement. That's number one. But secondly, it's putting the Israeli army in a shameful position and a very difficult position. It's like you have people internally criticizing you and outright entertaining ideas and thoughts and sometimes outright calling for refusal. Not all of them, but many of them. And they are accepting that. That was previously something totally unacceptable. They're accepting that and they don't really know how to deal with it. So that's why they're trying to give these people lectures, threaten them, warn them, oh, you will be dismissed for signing a petition or for like supporting the idea of someone refusing to serve. But again, they need them. And the Israeli prime minister, the war criminal, the wanted war criminal, he still wants to continue this genocide in Gaza. What do? Well, the IDF chief of staff, he tried his luck. He tried his luck a couple of days ago when he told Netanyahu that the desired objectives, your desired objectives inside of the Gaza Strip, they cannot be fulfilled with the shortage that we have. I mean, how more blunt can you be? The previous chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, told him before he went into Rafah eventually, because do you remember that period where they were threatening to go into Rafah for like months upon months, and then they actually did? Well, part of the delay was the crisis from back then. And now that crisis is 3 times greater. Back then, Herzi Halevi, the previous IDF chief of staff, who was kind of forced to resign because of continued pressure from Netanyahu and his lunatic allies, he said at the time, we need to exhaust every political solution before we take military action. When Netanyahu didn't like these statements, he started to say things that are more blatant. We urgently need 7,000 troops to go into Rafah. He said that outright. What did that mean at the time? That they were facing shortage from them? That's from the death toll in Gaza that they tried to hide, wounded, problems, refusal, resigning, people fleeing the country altogether. Okay. Then at the time, they started to talk about having the Orthodox community. Okay, now we need to go and bring these religious people back to the Israeli army. That was met with outright resistance. These people were protesting in the streets, saying very clear things like, we won't serve the Zionist army. We won't serve these blasphemous people. Yeah, things like, I believe the leaders of the resistance more than I believe Netanyahu because they believe in God. Stuff like that. But of course, you won't hear that. You won't see that on mainstream media. And I posted a lot of the images at the time, and I actually posted some in my community tab today about the Israeli forces in Jerusalem beating the daylight out of the Orthodox Jews in Israel. Telling you the safe haven for Jewish people, more like the hell for Jewish people. The worst place on earth for them. Beating them. Now, Zamir, the new IDF chief of staff, he is doing the same thing with Netanyahu in a different way. So he's not saying outright, we we shouldn't continue. But when an IDF chief of staff goes out there, this is what, should be understood clearly. When a chief of staff of the state says, well, we can't achieve the objectives with this current situation, what does that tell you? That says that he's not totally aligned with the prime minister's vision. He's giving him a reality check. Now, there's a saying that the wise will understand from the hint. But Netanyahu isn't understanding not just from hints, he's not understanding from blunt statements. The people who are serving, those in the Israeli army, well, they're seeing all of this. They're seeing Netanyahu saying all of this, seeing the protests in the streets. They themselves went and saw what they did. They were asked to go and invade certain areas, not once, not twice, but 3 and 4 and 5 times sometimes, getting out only to go back and see more resistance. Imagine how demotivating that can be. And many of them spoke about that demotivation, that fatigue, that exhaustion, let alone problems and PTSD. Israel was sending soldiers who were suffering from diseases and mental health back because they had no one to replace them. Although medically they shouldn't have gone back, but it shows you the state of desperation. Now, the rest of them, and all of them now, who served and who were called to serve again and again and again, they're seeing everything that's been happening for the past 1.5 years. Nothing has been achieved. People are only dying. Well, their own are dying. They're only bullying and killing innocent people outright. Children, women, innocent men, innocent elderly, hospitals, shooting for fun, bulldozers left, right, and center. Pure barbarism and sadism. And they're seeing the IDF chief of staff not entertaining the idea of Benjamin Netanyahu that his objectives of the war can be achieved by continuing this war. That, well, indirectly gives a backwind support to the movement that's happening in the streets. That isn't, well, anywhere near yet an actual full state of civil war, because those who are protesting in the streets, they never showed any intent of like raising arms. But when you have a split in the Israeli army that is this hard and this severe, with half of them totally objecting all of what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, others still going with reluctance, but also having internal problems, internal doubts anyway, criticism, and maybe, feeling, not well treated or being treated unfairly, because those who are not going there are free to talk and criticize, and they're going there to die and put themselves at risk. For what? To go back to the same cycle, the cycle of death and failure. And the recent attacks from the Palestinian resistance today, they showed very well that the Palestinian resistance is still capable. And it's not just only having a dynamic strategy of defense and waiting for ambushes, it's still not hesitating to use the same methods of armed resistance against Israel, similar to what they've done previously. And in that, they're telling Israel, well, we gave you a window. I mean, you decided to come in. We thought you just wanted a show. You came in. It's not really just a show. You don't want to continue down the path of ceasefire. Here you go. You killed another one, or most likely killed another one of your prisoners of war, Aidan Alexander. But the United States is denying somehow. I don't know what the United States knows that we don't know. There was a report coming from a U.S. official today saying Aidan Alexander is in a safe place. How do you know? What did someone tell you? Or are you in denial? Or do you not want the internal pressure? Or do you not want to look like a fool, like an idiot? Do you not want to look like you have blood on your hands? Everyone knows you have blood on your hands. Against your own people and against, of course, the Palestinian people. And even the prisoners of war, you talk about. They talk about hostages 24/7. You're killing them. You're giving Israel the bombs to land on them. What are you doing? Netanyahu doesn't care about it. So it's getting tense. It's getting tricky. Now, Israel is talking about, and when we say Israel is talking about, again, take it with not a pinch or two of salt, but with 10 buckets of salt. They're saying we had a counter proposal. We had a counter proposal to Egypt, and Egypt passed this proposal to Hamas. In Israel, they're trying to show as if Hamas are desperate, everything is bad for them. That, coming simultaneously with the reports that Benjamin Netanyahu had security consultations, might indicate that something is moving. And again, they're trying to kind of show this image of victory that Hamas is somehow submitting. Although Hamas told them yesterday, you can forget about it. When Egypt passed the proposal to Hamas that you need to disarm, basically. Egypt was criticized heavily for even passing that suggestion to Hamas. But Egypt said, some Egyptian officials or semi-official figures started to say, it wasn't us, we didn't really mean anything of that. We just passed the, information from Israel. This is their proposal. When Egypt said, you need to disarm, that's not even on the table. That isn't even an option. That's not something that is even negotiable. And according to Hamas at the time, it was the first time that it was actually added in the ceasefire draft. Meaning, Netanyahu is trying to make more problems. However, those reports from Israel about the talks, about this proposal that was sent to Egypt, and in Israel they said, again, I haven't seen that from other places too, but in a couple of Israeli media outlets, they said Hamas received the Israeli counter proposal, and they said that they are viewing this they're reviewing it. Again, no confirmation from Hamas. I'm just saying what the Israeli media is saying, by the way. Hamas didn't confirm that. Hamas, as a matter of fact, yesterday they blamed Israel of delaying, trying to, Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to delay more things, and he's trying to cause more problems so that he doesn't get an agreement. But Israel could be doing that for two reasons. These reports and that Netanyahu is having consultations. The first one is, they might actually have something that the Palestinians haven't said yet. I mean, there were cases before that happened. And then later on, the Palestinians' side started to kind of comment. There's a second reason they might have done that. The second reason is they want to show the families of prisoners of war and the rest of the public in Israel that we are close to a deal, so that they can take away from the pressure, so that they can show people know that we are working on it, hoping that it would work. And unfortunately, I mean, it continues to work, really. I mean, Netanyahu, every time that there's a lot of pressure against him, he comes up with something or an excuse, something to drag, and he continues. Like, there is a notion even from senior figures in the Israeli delegation that was negotiating to reach a ceasefire and who actually called for a ceasefire from over a year back, that Netanyahu is only negotiating as a show. Only negotiating as a show, both for the Israeli public and for the United States administration. For the United States administration, so that he can pacify them and tell them, okay, you want me to talk, fine, but give me the bombs and the money. Yeah, sure, Netanyahu, have the bombs, have the money, just talk. And he's talking without a gutted negotiating delegation. And with the Israeli public, he can go and meet them and tell them, I know, yes, but look, we're that close to defeating them. We're that close to eliminate them. And the Gazans will be expelled. And look, we are talking. but we won't submit to the demands of the Palestinians because they're ridiculous, and we will never allow another 7th of October, and start using this victim card, and they want to eliminate all of us, all of this talk. And then, of course, capitalize on this fear factor that Israel has been established on and always uses and capitalizes on. In the upbringing, really, of not just the Israeli public, the Israeli nationality altogether, this, bringing people and using fear to drag people to them and make them support these abhorrent, barbaric actions of the state of Israel. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream, everyone. And I'll open the space up for the community. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. See if we have any participation from the community. And thank you again for joining me in another live stream. Glenn Huxley. Where's Glenn Huxley? Let's see if I can see it on the live chat here. Opening a couple of live chats. Okay. There we go. Glenn, thank you so much, my friend, for your super. And who else do we have? And also HS, thank you very much. You said Iran. Do you see Iran agreeing to stop pursuing nuclear weapons? I would hate them to give in to the demands of this wicked administration. No, I don't think they will. There were reports today that there was a plan coming from the United States administration that Iran passes the uranium it already enriched to Russia. There was a meeting between the Iranians and the Russians. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, actually sent a message reportedly to Putin through his advisors. Iran, from their perspective, they outright denied that. They said enriching uranium is a red line, meaning that the United States is trying to stop them from enriching uranium. The leaked reports about Iran passing the enriched uranium clearly also have some sort of a backing. Why? Because there were also denials coming from Iran. Then, from the Iranian perspective, if the United States wants them to pass all of their enriched uranium to Russia, well, they have good relations with Russia. As a matter of fact, Russia reconfirmed the strategic agreement that it signed with Iran a couple of months back. They decided to do that today. But no sovereign country will do such a thing. It's very vulnerable. And it's part of the arrogant American administration trying to impose its will and, strip sovereignty of Iran and other countries too. But the Iranians know this game. Now, Russia, they're trying to get a deal. They don't really want to engage in any more conflicts. Ukraine's been taking a long time. They want to get it over and done with. But they're cooperating with Iran. To them, that's a strategic partnership, and they signed a strategic agreement. Iran wouldn't stop enriching uranium. The negotiations are about, from an Iranian, of course, the United States has arrogant demands, typical, supremacist arrogance. They still have the colonial mindset. That's why they support the genocidal entity and ignore the mass infanticide and genocide happening. And likewise, with the rest of the world, they look at them like that. Iran wouldn't do that, though. Iran wouldn't do that. From an Iranian perspective, the negotiations are about the nuclear organization monitoring the sites that enrich uranium, so that the United States and other countries who are worried about any potential nuclear weapon from Iran would be reassured that the levels of uranium enriched are not to a level of a nuclear bomb. Which is, to be honest with you, I mean, I think that even that is a little bit ridiculous, to be fair. There have been reports from 3 decades ago that Iran was on the brink of having a nuclear bomb. They were talking about that since the early 2000s. Iran is 2 steps away, 1 week away, 1 month away, 1 year away, 6 months away. It's like if they were a day or a month or a year away in 2003, then they probably have 100,000 nuclear bombs. I don't know how much, 100 or 200, right? But I don't think they will give in. Doesn't look like they want to give in. They are not in a position of weakness. They do want to get a deal, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't necessarily negotiate. So again, they're saying that they're going to talk again, by the way. There might be something behind the fact that they're choosing another country. Don't know why they're choosing another country. Oman was the mediator before. Oman actually mediated between the Iran and Saudi Arabia, pushed by China. But is that other country going to symbolize something? We'll see. We'll see how that goes. And also Qusay as well, thank you so much for your super. He said, Mahmoud, your thoughts on the arrests in Jordan. For those of you who don't know, there's a group of people, about 5, and thank you, Qusay, who were arrested in Jordan. They were arrested because the government said they were developing short-range rockets, 3 to 5 kilometers, and drones, and they're trying to frame the opposition. The opposition mainly is the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan. Muslim Brotherhood went out, said, no, we outright deny. The government is trying to cause an internal problem. How likely is it that someone would develop such weapons in Jordan? Well, there could be potential, but who does it serve? And again, that's not to deny that something like that might have been genuine, because there's genuine will from Jordanians to carry out attacks against Israel. Well, several of them already did and killed Israeli security forces in the past 2 years. But in Jordan, there's escalating tensions. There's protests in the streets every single day. The tensions are rising. There are more protests in Jordan, as in way more protests in Jordan than the West Bank, by the way. The West Bank, the other day, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, they banned a gathering, not even a protest, a gathering in solidarity for Gaza. At the same time, they're calling for protests in Gaza against Hamas. And guess what? People can protest in Gaza against the war. A couple of paid people will probably, speak up against the resistance and what have you. But those who are protesting or do protest sometimes or have gatherings in Gaza are protesting to end the war. Well, of course, they want to end the war. But in the West Bank, they banned them. Anyway, in Jordan, though, it's massive. It's very big. Still, full control the state has. But now this could be used as an excuse to potentially have a crackdown and introduce more severe measures to take a step back with regards to the protests, because the government in Jordan and the king himself has been very criticized heavily. The man outright took down Iranian missiles. Instead of landing in Israel, they landed in Jordan. They put Jordanians at risk. They caused financial damage. They almost killed people. So he's been criticized for that. Donna, hi Mahmoud, any news from the recent legal challenge Hamas has put to the UK? No, I didn't hear really any update about that. The Secretary of State has approximately 90 days to respond. If she does respond, and I'm sure now the Zionist lobby will be at it, of course. And today the UK, they welcomed Gideon Saar, the Israeli foreign minister, a man who calls for ethnic cleansing and genocide. The previous Tory government, they changed the law in Britain so that no one can take action against an Israeli official coming and issuing arrest warrants. Because in Britain, people were always active, as in the people. There were always people active against these war criminals. And they were asking the government and the authorities to arrest Israeli officials as soon as they were landing in Britain. Previous Tory government, back in 2009, they actually changed the law to protect the murderers. Typical. Our allies. Our allies. We need to protect them. So they protect them. And Gideon Saar was there today too. The Hind Rajab Foundation, they said, arrest him. They actually said the police needs to arrest him. They started to take action. But again, Britain. Britain started it with the Balfour Declaration in 1917. Starmer said that they can starve children. That's fine. That's why they call him kid starver. But no, they have 90 days. If in 90 days, Secretary of State, no, they don't do anything, they can take it to the committee that actually prescribes them, adds them on the list, and take a challenge, provide the argument. And their argument is very strong, by the way, because this whole thing is twisted, like political terrorist organizations. Total garbage political decision being made by one individual. They don't have to come up with a reason. They'll write up any old nonsense. Their reason for prescribing Hamas is because, according to them, they want to implement an Islamic state and they work against the Israeli occupation, as if that's a crime. As if it's a crime. And there are even legal flaws in the way they phrased it. And I spoke about it at the time, months, over a year ago, and again with this recent legal challenge. If they don't, they go to that committee and they will probably take the challenge. But I believe there's going to be a lot of politics behind it. And I believe that, or I think that it's very likely that the United Kingdom will refuse, the authorities in the UK will refuse this request by Hamas, simply because of their continued support and complicity in genocide. The United Kingdom establishment is complicit in genocide. It's actively participating in genocide. Declassified reported 200 reconnaissance missions. They're spying over Gaza and sending the info to Israel. Instead of taking evidence to the ICJ or the ICC, they're taking evidence for Israel so they can bomb more people. And that's despite the fact that Israel killed 3 British aid workers who were previous armed forces even in the UK when they were participating in World Central Kitchen in Gaza. Deliberately, by the way, although they had a sign, a logo on the car, and they were communicating with the army, telling them, we're moving from here to here. This is me. These are us. Killed them. What does the British government say? Nothing. No further comments. That's it. Nothing. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I don't think, of course, it's going to be successful simply because, but of course, it's an interesting move, because it creates a debate. It creates, it makes people talk. But the way the British government has been behaving is abhorrent. Completely, they have blood on their hands, as in, the people in power in Britain, they have blood on their hands. They're complicit in starving children and in war crimes. And they are welcoming war criminals, red carpet for war criminals, and still supplying them with arms. And thank you for that. Tor is saying, what is the situation in South Lebanon? The entity is still establishing there, and there are settlers back to the northern settlement. Well, some of the northern settlers were back, but not anywhere near half. So the majority of them didn't return. Now, with regards to Israel in Lebanon, they still hold these positions. And they are still attacking in Lebanon, and Hezbollah are still deciding not to respond. Are they preparing for something bigger? Is there something, Recently, there were talks and reports about the Lebanese president saying that, ideally I want 2025 all of the arms to be in the hands of the state. Hezbollah previously said that we don't mind speaking with the state and integrating within the army so long as we have a joint defense strategy. Are they actually preparing for something like that to happen, and can it succeed? Can it succeed and still keep the leverage or strategic element of the Lebanese resistance, especially as a deterrence against Israel? There are lots of questions, of course. It can't happen very quickly if it is going to happen. That's for sure. But so far, clearly, there's something happening there. Now, is Iran involved? Because if you talk about Hezbollah, Iran is heavily involved. As in, is that related to the United States talks with Iran too? Lebanon and keeping Lebanon quiet? Because Hezbollah as an organization and its organizational structure, it religiously belongs to the supreme leader in Iran. So if Iran has a certain agreement or a demand, either in the form of a hint or whatever, of, look, this is a period of de-escalation, Hezbollah will follow. And of course, that's not to say that like Hezbollah only operate based on Iranian interests and need always. No, that's not the case. Hezbollah are a national Lebanese movement that liberated and protected Lebanese territories. But the Iranian element is, of course, very heavily influential. To what extent is it included? Are they using the same leverage as they used against or with the Iraqi armed movements who were attacking Israel and then stopped? So we need to read all of these things. And it could be the case because the talks are about a big deal. Everyone who's talking talks about, there's a big deal happening. And if there's a big deal and there's space, or Iran is saying, for example, let's give it at least 6 months or up until the end of 2025, let's see what happens. And then, for example, all hell can break loose. And that's something that's being spoken about heavily in Lebanon, by the way. That's not like something extraordinary. But so far, Israel still controls 5 bases in South Lebanon. They are not showing any intent to withdraw from them. Will the government strategy succeed with the Lebanese resistance merging and, well, I don't know, so having some sort of a deal with Israel or some sort of an agreement or long-term agreement? Like Hezbollah did have a long-term agreement with Israel previously. Decision 1701 after the 2006 war. So there could be something happening again, but nothing has been released or published that would, or that gives any sort of confidence that it actually is successful or has any prospect of succeeding anytime soon. Gulliberg, Mahmoud, did you notice how Netanyahu walked when he was in Hungary? He didn't look so good. He was probably petrified from his shadow. Oh my God. Who is that? Netanyahu is a paranoid man. Him and his wife in Israel, you need to go and check how much they ask for protection. But his health isn't great too. Surgeries, heart problems, lots of things. And Michael McIntyre as well. Thank you so much, my friend. And let's see if we have anything else. Francis, thank you for getting the shirt. Thank you very much. I'm glad you like it. Anyone, if you want a good hoodie or a shirt, go visit my my store and support the independent journalism, ladies and gentlemen. Francis, thank you for that. Oh, we have a long list, guys. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Cool. We'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, for your comments and participation as well. Glenn, HS, Kosai, and Michael McIntyre, thank you so much for your supers, and everyone, thank you so much for your participation. I'll hopefully be with you with a couple of other videos, either later on this evening or tomorrow morning. In the meantime, everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening, day or night, depending on where you are. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.